I'll just welcome you and thank you for coming to showing up. I want to thank the Metro Alliance, Vancouver Alliance, for loaning us their Zoom to have this occasion. So thank you to the Vancouver Alliance, and thank you for showing up, because that's half the, as you know, if you're in urban ministry, that's that's 3/4 of the thing, is just to show up and be present. So the agenda today is for me to introduce Barry, and then move on to the case studies, and we have people lined up to talk about the case studies, and then in the book, and then we will move to a question and answers kind of discussion. And I know that there's a lot of people on here that have a lot of experience, a lot of interest, a lot of influence. And so I thank you for all coming to do this. Barry, are you on? Do you think I wonder if you got on? I'm going to introduce him anyway. I know that most of you know him, but I feel like it's important to say that it's an interesting task for me to introduce Barry Morris, because he and I met over 30 years ago, and my first meeting with him was at First United Church, and I can list his academic and accomplishments: 2 master's degrees. He's an author, co-author of 3 books, which is no small feat, as we know. The publications, Word on the Street, and the second publication, Hopeful Realism in Urban Ministry. He has over 50 years of urban ministry under his belt. He's the real deal. And, when I met him, I was looking for somebody who actually practiced what they preached, and Barry was that person for me and influenced me greatly at the time in my life. And, this captured my heart. And continues to capture my heart with regards to Barry as a friend. And he did just, make sure that he was countless witnessing to what was happening on the street, being with, and also changing the systems that put people on the street as well. So it made my life change 36 years ago, and he still impresses me and challenges me, as I know he challenges all of you when you talk to him, you get the chance to talk to him. So at this point in time, I was going to invite Barry to say a few words about why he wrote the book. Maybe what I can do, though, if he's not on, Barry, I think what I can do actually is maybe get him on my speaker. Try that. I mean, this is what happens with technology. I apologize, but maybe we can.
This is what happens with Barry.
Barry? Okay, I'm going to put you on speaker, and I just introduced you, so now I'm going to put you on speaker, and so you can talk about why you wrote the book. Okay, hold on. Okay, Barry, you're on.
Okay. Well, first of all, my apologies for this. And I want to thank people who have come on, especially people who are going to present. And I'm excited about the 3 case studies that the book features. It's not only about the Trauma Christian Resource Center, as it was embedded in the East Harlem Protestant Parish, at least implicitly in that model, and also, of course, the Dandelion Society, as it grew out of the Open Door and Our Place Society. And I know that Altisik and hopefully Pierre-Anne are going to speak to that. And for the CRC case study, I know that Jim Houston and hopefully Carmel Haley are going to speak to that. And then finally, the Streams of Justice, which kind of grew out, but is independent also of the Grandview Calvary Baptist situation here in East End, Vancouver. So the gist of the book is about how to understand, and if possible, practice some semblance of success, even though success is an ambiguous, elusive, even tricky, even seductive kind of term. Some of the book is more of a theoretical discussion, but an earnest one, I hope, trying to understand what possibly could success mean in terms of ministry, biblical faith, discipleship, interfaith, et cetera, et cetera. And I was helped a lot by the social theologian Luke Bradington. If you get a chance to read the book, all that will get unpacked, because there's some very subtle caveats or temptations when one tries to pursue success. And some of us are not freed not to pursue success simply because our funders insist on statistics and numerical kind of criteria to justify why we should exist at all. Never mind be refunded or continuously funded. I mean, if I'd had my brothers on the title, it would have gone something like A Faithful Public Witness, ? Subtitle, putting success in quotes so that it's deliberately intended for the reader to be a challenge to understand this book. But then the case studies help us with that, because around the charity and justice tensions, even conflicts, to the extent that there is a faithful public and prophetic witness by any ministry, including the three that you'll hear from within a minute, I promise. It's the question of how are they able to, how can I put it, stick handle that tension, so that if they are having to practice charity, it moves, if not on the ministry's own, at least in concert, in coalition, in association with social action bodies who are dedicated to justice in the sense of organizing for a redistribution of power. Otherwise, we're perpetually dealing with crumbs off the table. So the charity justice tension, which the book could have spent a lot more time on, it's developed over a few pages in the very last chapter. I think that's all I want to really say, Pam.
Okay, Barry, thanks so much.
I thank people for being present.
Okay, and I'm going to keep you on speaker so you can hear it, okay?
Please, thank you.
Okay. Okay, it's with my pleasure that we're going to start in on the 3 case studies. And the first case study is going to be with the CRC, the Christian Resource Center in Toronto. And we're going to start off with both Carmel Healy and Jim Houston are going to both speak. And I'm going to start with Carmel. I know that you have a time constraint, Carmel, so I'm going to get you to speak first. And Carmel Healy, as a former brother of the Jesuits, he left the order but not the faith, and succeeded Barry in 1975 when Barry went to Winnipeg, and then 35 years with the organization, and retired about 7 or 8 years ago. And so Carmel, I'm really, really pleased to have you here to start it off. And I'm going to introduce Jim as well, so he can just follow you directly. And so Jim, former Jesuit priest, again, worked for the Anglican Church after leaving the order, and worked in East Toronto, Jamestown area, was a part of the Canadian Urban Training, the CUT program of the United Church, which I'm very thankful for. I went through that program, changed my life entirely. Working for many, many years as an activist, and is also, I found out, an artist. So welcome to you, Jim, as well. Could everybody just mute themselves, and so the speakers can have the floor first? That would be great, because I can hear some little bit of rustling in the background. So Carmel, you're up. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to make a short presentation. I'm glad Mike Blair is here too, and he can fill in the many gaps I'm sure I will be leaving. So I was told to just give a short story about CRC and how I came into it and my role in it. So CRC was begun in 1965, as mentioned in the book, and it came about because of parishioners in Rosary United Church, which is a church on the east, northeast of downtown Toronto, where many powerful and rich families live. Many of these people used to go down to their offices and go by South St. Jamestown, a very low-income family where a lot of rooming houses were prevalent at that time and where a lot of families lived there. And they used to wonder what will happen to them, because at that time, the developers were blockbusting the whole area in order that they could demolish these houses and build apartment buildings in that time, in 1965. They asked, what can the church do? They actually went to East Harlem Protestant parish, and they came back and they come up with the plan of having the church be living down in South St. Jamestown in a house, and the church without the trappings. So the CRC started like that, working with the young people at that time and with the young girls that were being taught skills. With also with some of the agencies. And from there, the center, the Christian Resource Center, moved 5 times. It went up to Bleecker Street after a few years on Ontario Street. Then it went to Carleton Street a year or 2 after Bleecker. And that's where I come in. I came in, at that time I was leaving, I was a seminarian with the Jesuits. So I left because I didn't feel that I wanted to be ordained. And I plunged into the work of the center. At that time, it was a very small organization. And Carleton Street is in the Don Vale area. Today it's called Cabbagetown. It's an old neighborhood where a lot of homeowners have lived there for a long time. And but there were a lot of boarded up houses, and also a lot of rooming houses and a lot of low-income families living there too. And also we were experiencing at that time the first appearances of gentrification. A lot of people, young people, were coming down, buying rundown houses and fix them, and then of course turf out all the tenants, many of them roomers. At that time too, a housing cooperative was trying to build houses in that area and was meeting with a lot of opposition. So the center, and I got involved clearly with the rooming houses at that time and with the DACHI, the Don Area Cooperative Housing. It was very simple work. There were only about 2 of us, I think, at that time at CRC.
Carmel, can I just intervene just a little bit? Because I'm wondering, because of, in the spirit of time, because I know that we have a lot of speakers today, could you cut to the chase in terms of how, you know, your presence there, how this affected you, and maybe the highlights of your time there? Because there's so much history that we need to really kind of zero in on the impact that you personally and during your time there. That would be great.
Right. So yeah, just very quickly then, on Carleton Street, the main areas of work at the center were working with rooming houses and organizing roomers, as well as working for the cooperative that was trying to survive. From there, because the center was a tenant, moved to Spruce Street, and then it went over to Regent Park, which is a large enclosed area at that time of about 10,000 people, all high rises, and mostly for people who are of low income and or assisted living. And the center there eventually continued to work with rooming houses, organized and tried to bring change in the legislation, which it succeeded in 1987. And also started to open its doors to people who were homeless, because many people were homeless, as well as welcome the people in Regent Park. But it wasn't until after a few years that the focus on Regent Park and its tenants came about. with Regent Park, of course, we were involved with two attempts to develop Regent Park as an open community, open neighborhood. And the first part was not able to bring any outcome. But with the second part, which is the rejuvenation, is still going on. And the center had a very active part in working with the tenants to make sure that their voices were heard. So the center mostly was a center to be a resource to teach people or alert people how they are able to fish rather than give fish to people. And it tried to live that vocation through all its existence until now. And for me, one of the important things that I think I learned is to try to work towards long-term solutions and long-term resolutions to issues that we were dealing with, rather than be focused always on the one-on-one or the short term. So with that, I think I'll give time to Jim, and maybe Mike Blair would like to say a few words as well.
Sure. So I like that, like the long-term meaning, like the causes of and changing the cause, which is the more of the justice-seeking orientation and the cause of the poverty and the terrible situations. So Jim, could you chime in, please?
Well, I came along into St. Jamestown as a so-called interfaith minister to St. Jamestown in 1970. So the CRC was already well established, and by that time they were over on Carlton Street in the mansion. The house on Bleecker Street. Oh, I'm hearing myself echo.
Use that speaker because this is going to be
the house on Bleecker Street had already been torn down when I got there. So my job was to work in St. Jamestown with residents in the new apartment buildings. But I got to know the CRC through Barry Morris, who took the effort to come and meet me and welcome me to the neighborhood, sort of. And then anytime I ran into Barry, of course, in his long overcoat and his huge hair and enormous beard, he always had a new book to wave and say, you got to read this, it's seminal. I did visit the CRC a number of times, and I got involved a little bit with Ed Labacane and Dan Bailey, and they did the Operation Springboard. But I didn't have a lot of involvement with the CRC. I really knew it through Barry. And what I knew about it through Barry was this kind of old shoe that spent his time in the streets, meeting people where they were and taking trying to involve them in whatever action needed to be taken. So that's over the years, when I left St. Jamestown, went into other things, of course, I worked for the United Church for 7 years and got to know more about the CRC then than I ever had when I was working in the neighborhood. That's when I got to know John Metzen a little bit. And of course, old Bill Phipps there.
Okay, so what about like the highlights and the impact that that ministry for you had?
Well, I wasn't really aware of much impact until Carmel came along and focused on the rooming house tenants and focused on making changes in their lives, and eventually led to the building of a building. But really that's all I know from outside, is watching people like Barry and Carmel do their thing. But I was much more aware of Carmel's role in working with the roomers, and eventually in the renewal or renovation of Regent Park itself. Carmel had a role in that. As I understand it, understood it at the time, Carmel's role was to constantly remind the powerful people, the big mouths and the big egos who were going to make the changes, that these folks who live there, their voice needs to be heard.
Yeah.
And I think he made himself a bit of a pain in the neck on that with some people. But he never let them move along without bringing along the voices of the roomers, the street folks. Am I right, Carmel?
Carmel, is that one of your main values of the urban ministry that you did, is to hear the peoples, to hear their voices and have them the opportunity to speak on their own behalf, as opposed to...
That's right. The idea was to assist, roomers to use their voice, and eventually they did that through organizing as a roomers group, inviting people like Ian Scott, who was the Attorney General, and asking him to change the Landlord-Tenant Act so that they would be considered to be tenants, and to advocate for themselves in terms of quality of rooming houses, and also to work towards preserving rooming houses. At that time, they were vanishing.
Yeah.
So one of the goals was actually to try to work with landlords to continue to operate rooming houses and to get the city involved.
Well, I'm sorry that I have to cut you off because we have to move on to the other case studies. But of course, the book is there, and it is a huge testimony to what's happening there, and the questions that Barry's asking around the idea of success and what is success. How do we measure it? How do we evaluate it? How do we actually hold the people who say that they want to change things and still do it? And I know that Regent Park has changed completely. I know the developer there now, and in fact, it's funny because my brother is actually in the band they have this play, that they have an ongoing play about the changes at Regent Park that is sponsored by the developer there now. And I'm not sure about any ministry in there right now, but so we're going to move on to the second case study, and it's sort of a sequence of people. One, we're going to bring up Pierre-Anne Moon. We're going to be talking about Open Door, and then Our Place Society, and then we're going to move to Al for the Dandelion Society. So Pierre-Anne, you're there? Can you?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Thank
yes.
you. Oh, there you are. Okay, thanks. Pierre-Anne studied theology at the Vancouver School of Theology and education at UBC. She served at BC Conference Office in the United Church, Global and Social Concerns, and for many years taught in an alternative school in East Vancouver. So thank you, Pierre-Anne, and start us off with this sequence. Thank you.
Okay, and I'm just delighted to be here, and thanks to, yes.
Can I just interrupt, because I know that Carmel's going to go. I just want to thank you, Carmel, for coming on and giving us your time and the time that you had. And I'm sorry I cut you off, Pierre, but I really wanted to say that before he leaves.
Thank you, Pam, and
Yes.
I'll be here for a few more minutes, but
Okay.
thank you for the opportunity.
Great.
Okay,
And
thank you.
hi to everybody there, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, Pierre, I'm sorry.
And I echo that. Thank you for the opportunity to be part of this. And oh, Barry just keeps on going, keeps on working. He's there for the long haul, and I've always really admired that. I'm here not to speak directly about or anything I've been directly involved with, except as a family member of someone who was very much involved in the core team. Now I have to get back on. Of the founding of the Open Door in Victoria. And these were in the years, these were in the Bill Bennett years. Bill Bennett was there as premier till 86. I'm talking about the period from 1981 to 1986, when there were kind of two streams coming together. One was that there was more and more need in the inner city. The social assistance rates had been cut, the minimum wage was just stuck, and there was a great lack of affordable housing in the inner city of Victoria. And at the same time, churches were trying to find themselves in terms of mission. Every church had an outreach committee and so on, but they felt that outreach would be part of what was the revitalization of inner city churches. Did the churches have an awareness of what was happening even in their own neighborhoods, or even in the same block as the church in the inner city? And I know that my father, as a ministry person on the ministry team at First United Church, found in those years that people were coming to the side door, knocking on the side door of the church and saying, you know, I'm hungry, I have nowhere to stay. You know the stories. You've all heard those stories, but tremendous need. And in the churches, I know more about what happened at First United Church. There was a stream of people that became a river of people in those years. Great need, and a lot of people had need in particular for housing. Now, the churches embarked on a revitalization project, and they felt that their outreach was key to that. Out of that, there were 6 inner city churches, but in particular Centennial, First United, and Metropolitan United came together in an inner city church council. That was 1984 to 86. And they felt that it would be important to do what in terms of the Metro Alliance in Vancouver would be called a listening campaign. It was listening to those in need, also listening to the churches, what they felt they could provide, and the education they needed. And out of that came a recommendation for an outreach worker and advocacy work for systemic change to meet the needs. It was the foundation, laying the groundwork for the Open Door was really 5 years, and involved educational workshops within congregations, and to create awareness that eventually became the support and the volunteer team that was the underpinning of the Open Door work. The congregational workshop started with people asking, you know, the typical uninformed question: why doesn't that guy outside the door just you know, comb his hair and get a job? My father really appreciated that question because it opened up the conversation within the congregation, and to discussion about the systemic reasons for the poverty they saw. In 1986,
And
yeah,
I'm sorry, again, it's a timing thing for
yeah,
me, and there's just
okay.
so much, and I want
Then
to.
I'll sum up. Shall
Okay.
I sum up then? Okay. The Open Door opened in 1986, and the foundation of it, which I believe was foundational to the Open Door and the ministries which follow, which Al Tissick will speak of, was that volunteers were trained, and the basis was relationships and friendship, but also then back into the congregations to think about not just the charity, but the justice work. The teamwork was key, and the willingness of the people engaging and the congregations to be transformed in the encounter. I think that my dad would be greatly impressed with the work that's followed, built on that solid foundation. I think that allowed the ministries to thrive, but at the same time would be really sad that it was still necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I saw Barry Morris on earlier, and I don't know if he's still. Barry, are you on?
I'm on by telephone. Are we going to get to Al?
Yeah, we're going to go. We're going
Brother Al
to
Tissick? Thank you, Piran.
Al Tyson. I just want to make sure you're on there, Barry. Okay, so you're gonna. So Al, you're next up. Al.
Finally.
Al Tyson. He's part of
Tissick.
As he's been committed for many, many decades of urban ministry, and you can read more about him on his website, actually, of the Dandelion Society. So I won't go into too much there. So Al, welcome, and please let's hear from you, because we also have another case study. So
I answered Barry's questions. I'm going to be clear. Hello.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
I answered Barry. Okay. I answered Barry's questions, so I'm going to be fairly quick, but I got them summarized here. I'll read them to you. Of my ministry in Victoria started with Lawrence's dream. I think his knowledge of the United Church of Canada, his ability to lead the Victoria Presbytery through that research that Brianne talked about was vital to what I am doing today. So I want to stress that his trust he had gained within the church was so important. And within the Presbytery, Victoria Presbytery, the conference and the national church, our work wouldn't have been possible without that plowing that he did. And I talked to all of you that's worked in the church knows what I mean about that plowing. His faithful Christian journey was without question. The dream was a dream of justice, and he used to repeat this, not just us, justice, not just us. I remember him repeating that so often. The deep respect he had gained from the homeless by including them in the discussion was vital and continues to be vital. His recognitions of others in the field outside the United Church, the Catholic Church, the 910, the Sobering Center, which was a government agency of Vancouver Health Authority, the Kool-Aid Society, and so on. Upon his retirement, I applied and got the job. Victoria Presbytery, under the leadership, I want to bring Audrey McLennan and her great leadership across the country brought me to Victoria. Let's see what else I'm going. Oh yeah, I don't want to forget Evelyn, his wife, Lawrence's wife, and Mary, my partner and wife. Our work would not be possible without them. They're often forgotten, and I get a little emotional about this. And we in the church point to Alan Tissick or Lawrence Moon and forget the great work, hours of work that they did without being paid to assist us in that work. So I think that's important to say out loud. I want to talk a bit about the success of the book and move on quickly here. So I want to say the success of the book is because of Lawrence and that faith, and Evelyn and the Victoria Presbytery, an army, and Piran mentioned it, an army of volunteers, faithful men and women that served and gave of their life to the early ministry and the ministry I'm doing now. A multitude of donors, parishioners mainly, the United Church of Canada, the Conference of BC, the National Church, all gave to see Lawrence's Moon dream come about. The men and women who walked the streets, who walked with us through this dream. Success was due to many. And I think we live out that. Barry points that in Micah 6:8 in the book. I appreciate that so much, Barry, that statement in the book of that being a note of clear success. Barry points out the faith that was needed for success throughout. My overall thoughts, the book was challenging. It challenged justice against charity, and that's always been a hard one for all of us to work out. We needed charity to raise money, often to do the justice, so they were intermarried often. The book notes success of urban ministry. And I just want to point out that, that as the open door turns into our place, it turns into a secular organization from a Christian-based organization, still connected to the church, but clearly a secular organization. And that raises me concerns about the future of the church and how we more involve them.
Okay.
Barry's first faith has been long-term, and just honored to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Al, and hopefully we'll have a little bit of time in the end to have some questions back at you, but I really want to get to, and thank you, Pierre and Al, for that. Going to go to the third case study, and Teresa Dewart, sorry, is here to speak about streams of justice. And Teresa is a high school teacher, guidance counselor, active in the Grandview Calvary Baptist Church in my old neighborhood. I used to live on Salisbury and Gravely. And social activist with women's issues, Indigenous housing, poverty, and began Streams of Justice. So thank you for coming, Teresa.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I feel a little bit, and I talked to Barry about this before and have talked to Barry about this many times, just about the whole, like, bringing streams of justice into the ministry language. We've never considered ourselves a ministry of the church, but an organization, I guess, that wants to engage in that conversation between justice and charity. And I mean, Dave and I Dave's my partner, who we were really involved with the meal program that Grandview started many years ago, and through that meal program developed pretty significant relationships with people on the margins, and those people started to really inform our sense of the need to challenge the charity model. And you know, lots of people were involved with that with us, and we decided at one point, I don't know when it was, like 2003 or something like that, or 5, I can't remember the timing, but we decided to host a series of almost like lectures. Dave was a professor at Regent at the time, and has a long kind of standing relationship to the biblical text, the prophetic text. And so we did these series of, we called them Reading the Text, Reading the World, and had lots of really good feedback from that. And from that, a group of people decided that they wanted to really focus on this, I guess, a way of thinking about our faith through reading the text, and so education, reflection, and action, that cycle. And we knew in some ways that it had to be almost separate from the institutional church. And we're pretty intentional about that. We were really intentional about not having paid people, or not having it turn into a ministry. We met together for years, developed sense of how we wanted to engage in the community, and we worked on especially homelessness and poverty issues through, you know, challenging the system that was in place, and working with non-faith organizations in the city. And those working relationships were really important and I think formative in terms of the group's ability to keep challenging ourselves and challenging systemic injustice. I think that we were, I wanted to kind of talk about that success piece because
that's what I was going to ask you. It's like to move into that.
Yeah, I feel I feel a bit disingenuous right now because I'm not Dave and I aren't really involved in the group anymore for a couple of reasons. And I think after the Olympics, the organizing in Vancouver really shifted and changed, and it was difficult for us as a group to be, I think, faithful to the changes that were happening within our own understanding of how to challenge and what needed. And so the group, I think, Barry might be able to offer some more insight. We talked about it, like why the group kind of shrank and people kind of moved on and did different things. And now, I look after my grandkids so that my daughter and her partner can go rather than me be there. So it feels like success, I don't know, like we did what we did because we felt compelled to do the things we did. And they were things that we felt, well, for myself personally, I felt like that was how I could be faithful to my understanding of justice from a biblical faith perspective. And like just in listening to the other folks, I see that this need or this real attention to the marginal and hearing their voices and responding to those voices is super key. Yeah. And we were never really all that interested in like changing the church or anything like that, because we recognized the church has its own role, and the institutional church, right, has its role. And I think Tim is there. He could probably speak to that a little bit more.
I was actually
always appreciated. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I want to leave time for questions and answers. So
I'm good. Yeah.
Yeah, but if you have a wrap up kind of comment, that would be great.
Oh, just I just feel like if you're gonna be a person of faith, you got to get engaged, and that's what people do, and you get engaged in many different ways and at different times, and
different places, different times, and it's a journey for all of us. Tim, I know that I didn't talk to you, but I don't want to put you on the spot, but Tim was the minister of the Grandview Calvary Baptist Church for 32 years. And are you there? Do you have any, did you want to chime in a little bit on that, Tim, or?
Sure, I'll just make a few comments. One is, as the pastor of the church, one of the gifts Streams brought to the church, there were two gifts, real big gifts in my mind. One is the perspective on justice that Dave and Teresa and others and articulated, influenced the whole church significantly. And then secondly is it was helpful as a pastor where we hadn't quite come to consensus around our response to a particular issue as a whole church, that I could point people towards Streams and say, but some people are responding to this issue, and here's a way for you to participate in that. And that was a real gift. And then I think another thing to commend Streams for, and particularly Teresa, is the incredible relationships they built with First Nations land defenders, and the trust that the church was drawn into because of Teresa, Dave, and others' commitment to that. And I think a word needs to be said too for their persistence. Just incredible long years of commitment to this that Teresa and Dave and others have given. And I think there's something to that stability and longevity that is really important to this work, and I think to be commended.
Thank you. Well, it seems to me that persistency and long time thing, and this is what occurs to me is that it is a long-term commitment, because it's always there. So if we're a people of faith, then how do we manifest that in our actions? And as the Micah, in the words of Micah. So Barry, I'm going to pull you back in a little bit. I know that there's other people online that have so much experience in urban ministry, and we have 10 minutes left, and I'm wondering if Barry, you have a question for the presenters that they could have first crack at it, but then we could have a discussion. And I think we want to zero in around the idea of urban ministry and that tension of success that Barry was talking about. And what I'm also hearing from the conversations is that a lot of them were founded from a very deep commitment to humanity and to justice and to faith. If you see it outside your door, what are you going to do about it? Like, what are you going to do about it? And what is the church doing about it right now? And there's a difference also between people in the church and the church institution.
Well, Pam, I just want to,
number of levels that are going on there. So yeah, Barry?
Well, Pam, something that Al could have mentioned, and he might want to touch on it in 15 seconds or less, is why he came out of retirement. He retired from Our Place Society. I think he unsuccessfully tried to retire. He came out of it and gave the name Dandelion Society. And in one sentence, Al, why did you give it the name Dandelion Society?
You have to unmute, Al.
Like our church itself, it's a weed that won't go away. We're always going to be bugging you. So I thought the dandelion, you can make wine out of it, and it finds its way through the cement, as many of the people that we work with in urban ministry do.
Yeah, I agree with Doug Flint's laughter there in Winnipeg. Doug, I totally agree with you, Doug Flint. Thank you, Al. And Teresa, the name streams from Amos 5:24, let justice roll down like streams. That's an incredibly important image. Do you recall how we came to that?
Teresa, you need to unmute.
I think she has to unmute.
I'm trying to.
There you go.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Well, that was like we spent 6 months as a group of people,
right,
trying to figure out our identity and who we were and what we wanted to be about. And I think, it is mostly because of, our commitment to that prophetic tradition. We saw ourselves as, people who needed to speak into a system that was, very flawed, and, the streams, it sounded good. Does that help, Barry? You probably have a better idea.
No, that's great. And Pam, for the CRC, it came to the image of 40 Oaks. Now, 40 Oaks is the address for the Regent Park United Church, where now the Christian Resource Center recently amalgamated with Fred Victor Mission, which is another story and possibly a seductive temptation. But anyway, 40 Oaks, what's the significance of that, if anybody knows, like Michael Blair perhaps, or somebody else? Maybe John Deacon might know that. Why 40 Oaks? All right.
John Deacon, do you know that? There you go.
40 Oaks, good question. At one point in its history, about 10 years ago, CRC recognized that the story, as good as it was, lacked people to communicate it. So, and it also did a terrible job of recognizing individuals who, through its history, had contributed to its legacy. So they set up this this designation called Companions of CRC, and at the end they appointed in capturing that history, they did a little bio called 40 Oaks, and they identified 40 major contributors to the CRC. Most of it, fortunately, focused on the residents, but it also included people that had some history either in terms of board contribution or who just shaped the in the way that the agency has evolved. And
such as yourself, John.
Yeah. So and I feel completely dwarfed by all of you because my involvement was a rich kid. 1967 or 65 when the CRC started, I was president of the Rosedale Youth Group. And so on the other side of the tracks, clearly. And if it hadn't been for the CRC, I think I would only know the other side of the tracks. So I'm really influenced by Barry Morris, Carmel Healy, Michael Blair.
Late John Metzen.
And John Metzen. So anyway, I'm really enthused about this book, and I'm certainly delighted to hear from as many as you I have, because I had no idea what happened to Barry after 1975. I knew he'd be trouble somewhere, and it's obviously he's been trouble a lot of places. So.
And made a difference in a lot of people's lives. And it's interesting because I see other people who influenced a lot of people, particularly Vicky Obedkoff, and are you in Saskatchewan now still? And Judy Graves and Ken Leotier, all of people in my life made a very big difference in terms of urban ministry and my faith journey as well. So there's just so much here. Is there any question? Barry, do you have another question, or should we?
No, that's fine, Pam.
Open it up. Does anybody? If you have a question, you can put. We have a few minutes left. We can put one in.
Or comments.
In the chat, or even a comment. I know Bill Blakey's online.
Bill Phipps. Paul Naherney in Edmonton.
Dale Perkins on. I'm not sure, but
Mark McGuire in Toronto.
we have a lot of people, a lot of experience on here. So, any comments? Come on, someone, you can do it. We're talking about any comments on the tension between the idea of charity, justice, and success. I think this is a very, very difficult tension, but one that also can motivate in certain ways as well. So any comments on that from anybody?
Bill Phipps. Are you unmuted, Bill?
Yeah, I am now. Actually, I have a question about a couple of people I think mentioned the Canadian Urban Training Project, Canadian Training Center. Since Michael's on the line and some others, is there anything now that bears any kind of resemblance to how that was a hugely important thing for many, many people across the country? Is there anything similar now that people can engage in to help their ministries, urban ministry?
Good question, Bill.
Does anyone have any thoughts on that? Al?
It's Michael Blair here. I don't think there's nothing at the moment. I think when cuts ended, nothing ever kind of took its place.
Why not?
I'm a newcomer. It's you old guys have to answer that. Sorry.
Money's part of it.
I'll try to take a stab at it. There was some question about the church, as usual, using our family on the street rather than engaging with them. The experience was rich, but there was some question in the national church about our motives. The goals of that were centered around us again. So there was just some question around that at the national church around the ending of that.
Okay, well, it's 4:59, and this was an hour-long webinar. This is almost like a teaser for those who haven't read the book. Also, this recording will be sending it out to you, so you can send it out to others if you wouldn't mind. By doing that, you'll spread the news about not only the book, but the thoughts behind the book and the motivation behind the book, which is to address these tensions between charity, justice, urban ministry, and success. And I want to commend Barry personally.
And MVA.
Pardon me?
And Metro Vancouver Alliance for allowing us to be on.
I that already, but I'll do it again. And thank you to Metro Alliance, Vancouver Metro.
Vancouver Alliance.
And all of you and the resource people that showed up to speak about this. And I understand there's just so much to this, but I encourage you to get the book either through, you can reach out to Barry to get the book, or you can also get the book through
the publisher, which is, can I say it, Pam?
Yeah, Willie, yes.
Yeah, you can email to William at wipfandstock.com. William at wipfandstock and ask for a shipping discount. Or you can call me and I'll give you a reduced price and cover the postage, etc.
Hopefully, and if you would take a moment in the chat to put your email in if Barry or I don't have it already, because then we can send this recording out to you, and you can share it with others. So with that, I think I'd like to close. And what I was going to propose is to close with the prayer. It's the original version of the Serenity Prayer, and I really, really like it. Barry uses it all the time, and I can say it out loud, and others if you know it. But God grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things that we ought to, and the wisdom to distinguish the one from the other. And amen. And
amen.
Amen.
And thank you,
Thanks
Barry,
so much.
your continued work and your prophetic witness. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is anybody hanging around to chat for a minute?
Thank you. Why not?
Okay, I'm going to stop recording.